Hello, my fellow kin. Welcome back to the channel. Now, as many of you know, last week GW previewed in their reveal show the upcoming models for the Leagues of Votann, our highly anticipated Wave 2. And suffice to say at the time, oh, it's happening! It's happening! Oh, yes! I was pretty excited. Now, some days have passed since. I took some time after the hype left my system to kind of look back at some of these models and look at some of the ongoing discussions I was seeing online and see what people were kind of thinking about them. And something that I noticed and kind of started to feel myself was that something felt a little bit off with some of these models that they previewed. I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was exactly that was throwing me off, but something just didn't feel quite right. And I wasn't entirely alone in this. I had seen countless comments on my own video when we were doing the live show of people saying they felt a little bit disappointed, they weren't really happy with the direction the art was going in, and then on Reddit as well. So I didn't feel that at first, but after looking back at it and taking some time, like I said, once the hype was gone, I kind of started to get that sense as well. And I wasn't sure why. Well, some time has passed now, and I think I've kind of figured out what it was for me that wasn't exactly working. So in today's episode, we're going to do a deep dive on the new reveals that were shown to us, what I think works really well, what I think, in my opinion, was a little lackluster, and why I think that might be. But before we go any further, of course, a massive thank you to our channel members. Jordan Stuckenschneider, The Pulp, Sam P, Austri TM, The Bidigus, aka Keanu Reeves, Travis Taylor, Aaron Easley, Mr. Wolf, Realist Chance, Ron Helton, Ham Sandwich, Jordiak, Last Dracon, Matt Castro, Alexander Swart, Chaos King Plays, Two Tone Terry, Johnny Fanny, Gigi the Groovy, and Nomander Doorkicker, Ezreal Riziel, Kurt Williams, Brandon Murphy, Florian Vigneron, Sanguinius's left nut, still missing his right one, Nicholas Stapp, Clevy 800, No Sight Tactics, Quack, Remy Marchand, Wix KE, Lane Reed, Josh Griffiths, and Benjamin Roberts. Thank you guys so much for your ongoing support. It really does mean a lot. So I think before we dive into the new models, there's kind of like some core foundation we need to first identify as the basis for our comparison here and our whole point that we're going to be making in this video. Now, for me personally, when I think about dwarves, fantasy dwarves, there are a few key physical traits that come to mind as like easy identifiable and like, yes, this is successful in the fantasy of telling me that this is a dwarf, right? What we see is that they're usually quite short, ancestors forgive me, they're usually quite bulky, whether it's through their own physique or it's the armor that they have on, it's quite heavy, it's custo. And we see there's a few virtues or personality traits that a lot of these dwarves have, which are the stereotypical, like very proud, very noble, very venerable. These are revered people. They hold a lot of rich history. They're very close with their kin and their families and their clans. They have a very industrialized like theme to them, I could say. Like a lot of them, for the vast majority, are seen living in either mountain holds, mountain hills, in valleys. These guys love minerals. Historically, right, what we see is like the easiest thing to come to mind is that they're miners, right? And I think when we look at that first wave, I think GW nailed it. When the first wave of Leagues of Votann launched, I was immediately enthralled by them. When I saw them in like the industrial paint scheme that I ended up going with, I was 100% sold on them. And the reason for that, I think it's very clear, right? Like you look at any one of these models, like the main ones that came out in Wave 1, and I think they perfectly embody everything that I just described in terms of what makes a fantasy dwarf, right? Like they take a look at the Hearthguard, right? They're short, they're bulky, they have heavy armor on. You feel their pride, you feel their nobility on the battlefield, their honor that they hold, the stance that they're in. It's all very proud. It's all very honorable. And I think that the range really embodies that quite well, even from the stances that the characters are in, with the Hearthguard champion, right, running down the hill like a literal battering ram. It fits so well. That industrialization, it screams it when I look at it. You take the Hecaton land fortress, for example. Yes, this could be a vehicle for war, but there's a utility to it, right? Like fundamentally, if I look at this model and I do not know what the Leagues of Votann are about, I can look at this and say, oh, I could see they're probably from like a mining colony. There is actual use to this model outside of just warfare. It fits the aesthetic and the theme, in my opinion, of the dwarves. Same thing with like just like the chunkiness, right, of some of these tanks. Like I said, we see it with the mining equipment of the Chthonian berserks who have their power mauls to crush rubble. Yes, it crushes skulls when they're fighting in war, but there's this underlying utility, this grounded reality of the model that expresses the world it lives in. And thematically, it's all extremely appropriate and on point for what I think the dwarven fantasy is all about. All of this really just encapsulates the dwarven fantasy just by visually looking at it. Even things that are a little bit further out there, like initially I was not entirely sold on the pioneer side, right? Like the Jaegers, the pioneers on the bikes. It didn't really feel dwarven to me in the sense of how they looked. Sure, they were short and they were a little chunky because they had their plate on that the warriors have as well. But the idea of the bikes like moving fast, it made sense thematically in the universe they built this first wave and the lore they built around it. These guys are frontiersmen. They go to planets, they try to colonize, they try to grab resources from them. So obviously you would have a group, a cohort of dwarves that would be leading this frontiersmanship on the planet. So all in all, with Wave 1, you have this really thematic, cohesive wave of the Force, right? Like the theme is very strong, it's harmonious. You have the frontiersmen who are leading the excavation to get there first, and then you have some of the heavier industrialized pieces that come down and just start mining and excavating all the resources for the planet. You have the proud stance, the stereotypical armor that you would see, the bulkiness, the nobility, the pride of the Hearthguard, their stance that they're in. They're all very confident, right? They all have a lot of rich history to them, a lot of rich knowledge that you see in the characters. Even the Grimnir, for example, there's kind of like this underlying Norse theme as well that's going on with a lot of the heraldry, iconography, which I think is also really important for dwarves to have, as we've seen some examples on the screen here, like with Total War Warhammer. You look at any one of these kits and the fantasy just makes sense. So when we look at Wave 2, like credit where credit's due, we got a lot of stuff, way more than I anticipated us getting. Like we could have got 3 of those things and I would have been overjoyed, but we got a bunch, and I think that that's amazing. So thank you, GW. Please keep giving us more Votann models. Absolutely, I love them. I'm very happy with everything that we received. But I think that when we look at some of these models and we compare that to what I mentioned in terms of the fantasy of the sci-fi dwarf, the theme, the narrative that's been established, I do feel like there are some incongruencies that we see in this second wave. And I think that's probably what's throwing people off. So let's dive in and talk about each one of these new models. So first up, the artillery piece. I think personally the artillery piece for me is a 10 out of 10 model. Just thematically, it absolutely fits with the whole idea, the theme of the Votann army. It's this industrialized army. It goes to planets. It prioritizes the excavation of resources. It uses existing models as a base on the actual frame. So like on the base itself, we have Chthonian berserks. So there's some harmony there already. The actual artillery piece that they're using is quite simplistic in its nature, but it is characteristic of some of those physical traits we mentioned, right? There's some beef to it, there's some weight, and it like utilizes these little drills that go underground. So again, just really reinforcing that whole idea of the dwarf fantasy being these excavators or these miners or these pioneers. So I think this is a 10 out of 10 piece. Also, just like in terms of the actual dwarven fantasy, we see this a lot. Artillery goes hand in hand with dwarves. Why is that? Because it just complements their whole, like, we are these bulky, beefy dudes who just stand there and make a line, and we have some kind of long-range pressure that is going to bring our enemy to us. We hold the line, we let them come, and then we stand strong. So for me, this model is an absolute 10 out of 10. It perfectly captures the spirit of the army. It is congruous with Wave 1, and I think it's going to be a wonderful addition to have in my army for Wave 2. I just dropped water all on my shirt and microphone, so hopefully it still works. All right, so now let's talk about what I think is one of the biggest offenders from everything we just discussed. The unit that, for me personally, I have the biggest gripe against, and that is going to be the Steeljacks. Now, the Steeljacks, the way they're presented inside of the reveal show and on the Warcom article is that these guys are supposed to be you're really the most durable thing Votann have access to in terms of objective holders. They get on objectives, they stand their ground, nothing shakes them from it. That's really the big selling point that they're trying to push here with these. For me, when I look at any model in the game, something that is extremely important from, I think, like in an artistic perspective, is having your model visually tell the story of what it's doing. Like, what is this thing? If I look at a model, I should be able to know right away where it fits, what it does, what purpose it serves. I look at the Hecaton Land Fortress, like I mentioned before. This looks like it's an industrial vehicle. It gets dirty, it gets grimy, it could transport things, it has a lot of guns on it, probably use it underground, above ground for warfare, for mining, for resources. I look at the Berserk, same idea, right? Like, when I see a model, it should tell the story. The artillery is a perfect example of this, right? It's an artillery piece, but you look at it, you know it's an artillery piece. You know what it does. You know where it belongs. When I look at the Steeljacks, personally, I do not see durable objective holders. They, just like characteristically, physically, they go against everything that I mentioned, that like thematically as to what makes a dwarf. Whereas dwarves are short, these guys are really tall. Whereas dwarves are bulky, these guys have really lanky legs, which feels a little bit weird, right? There is some meat on it, there's some beef, but it doesn't feel like it's at like a dwarven level. So something feels a little bit off. I've seen some edits online about people making them a little bit thicker. I think this helps. But for me personally, the biggest thing is these guys don't look like they hold objectives. They look like they have a movement speed of 7 because they have long legs. They're robotic, so why would they be slow? You could program them to be faster. They're lightweight. I think I see these guys, even the stance that they're in, it doesn't really look like they're defenders. It looks like they're attackers. So I would personally see these guys playing a role more akin to being like a fast attack piece, to be honest with you. I don't see the model telling me that this thing holds objectives. Maybe they should have built it with a shield. I don't know, I think that might have helped a little bit, like an enforcer type of deal, like a Bolgrin, if that's what they were going for. But I just think physicality-wise, it doesn't represent the aesthetic I'm looking for when I think about a dwarf. And the narrative side of it either, I don't see these guys as just being like these durable pieces that hold objectives. They look a little bit too disproportionate for that. They don't have the bulk in the right places. The stance doesn't scream that to me for their story. Another issue I have with them is that whereas some of the other models feel like they're all tied together by these emblems or this heraldry or iconography that I mentioned is, I think, a very important part to like the hierarchy or the sense of wholeness or synergy between like the dwarves. I feel like these guys, it doesn't feel very organic. Sure, they have some pieces that are reminiscent of what the other units have, like the crest on their head. One guy has a sigil on his leg, but it doesn't feel organic, if that makes sense. It feels like it's just like, oh, we need to put something on this to tie it into Votann. They have crests, slap a crest on it, slap a sigil on his leg. It doesn't actually feel like it's a living, breathing unit. Like these pieces are part of the real armor this thing would be equipped with. There's no functional purpose for this to exist. Like take the dwarves, right? Like take the Hearthguard. You could build them like to have sort of like these sigils, which could be vents theoretically, right? Like because their armor is like so hot and it's just like this bulky thing. They need to have airflow that goes through, or it could be like representing how elite they are in terms of like the power armor they're equipped with inside of their clan. So I think it's just a bit of a miss for me, this unit. I don't really feel like the dwarven theme resonates in this. It feels kind of just tacked on. And the other thing I just want to mention here as well has to do with the weapons, but I'm going to circle back to this in a little bit in due time. Let's talk about the Ironkin character next. Now, the Ironkin character, I still stand by my initial impression that he is like a 10 out of 10 model. Like isolated, I think he's extremely well designed. I think he looks absolutely great. And he's not too like over designed in terms of like how busy he is. I think it's quite elegant actually, the pose it's in, to manage to weigh like the weight of the different components on him. He feels proportionate, he feels real, which I think is really good and important as well. So I think they did a great job from a design perspective. My gripe with this is actually more in line with how it fits into the dwarven army and actually like the tone of the model. So like I mentioned a little bit earlier, for me, like the tone with these dwarves is really, and has always been with wave 1, they're kind of like a little bit more of like a noble caste, a noble race, I should say, right? Like they feel good. They feel like they are really just these guys who are going around mining resources as best as they can and trying to survive and profit off of the galaxy. And like some of those traits that I mentioned personality-wise for dwarves as well, like that sense of venerability, of honor, of just like dignity, right? Of being like a good dwarf. When I look at this model, I was surprised to see that the way, maybe it's just the way it's painted, but it comes off as a little nefarious. Like he's kind of like this, right? Like it's ominous. It's a little bit dark. Like a lot of people thought it was an AdMech model from the what was it called? From those little snippets they do, the teasers. And even after the model was released, a lot of people in the AdMech Discord and in the AdMech subreddit were posting this model and wishing it was AdMech instead. And I could see why, right? Like it kind of tonally doesn't feel like it fits with what already exists for the Leagues of Votann. It feels like it's going in a little bit of a different direction in terms of tone and mood. And again, like another really good point that I think represents this is the way it's painted with the shadows. There's a big emphasis on the shadows coming up from underneath of this model, right? And I think that paints it in kind of like an evil tone. Maybe that's what they were going for. Like lore-wise, there's something that's a little bit off with these AI. Maybe, I don't know. But that to me was something that stood out, and I think maybe why some people feel a little bit off. The tone kind of clashes with what we have seen with Ironkin previously. With the Ironkin previously, they feel a little bit neutral, they look a little bit cute, they look a little bit happy, and they help the dwarves out because the dwarves made them. When we look at this guy, he looks like he's kind of a mastermind. He's a little bit more nefarious, so maybe a little bit more evil. He's hiding some secrets and he's doing weird things that nobody knows about. But again, maybe that's by design. So I really like the model. I think it's well made. I just feel like maybe that's one of the reasons why people felt a little bit off about it. All right, next I want to talk about Brumi. This is the one I'm sure everybody was waiting for. Now, Brumi, hear me out, okay? Brumi on paper is the biggest offender of the values I mentioned earlier for the dwarves. However, it's okay and it's fine because our wandering lost boy, thematically, when you read his lore, it all makes sense. This is a model who goes hand in hand, in my opinion, with the lore that was provided to him. Right? Like it just, once you read the lore, you look at this character and you say, oh, this is really off. It doesn't look like it fits into the dwarf narrative. He doesn't look like he's very noble. He doesn't look like he's very clean. He looks a little disfigured, a little disgruntled. He's wearing Tyranid armor. Like this is a very strange looking piece to be included in the Votann range. He's missing that sense of dwarf, except for his size, and of course that he's a cow. But with the lore, you kind of understand a little bit more like, okay, this guy lost literally everybody in his entire league. They all died. They all got eaten by Tyranids. He got eaten 3 times himself, so he's a little bit disfigured. And now he's kind of like this wandering hero who goes around joining different leagues. And I think, personally, this works really, really well, especially with the whole Norse mythology that they've been kind of building up for the Leagues of Votann, because it really borrows from that. Like, think about these old folklores you read, these old stories about the Nordic gods, right? There's always like this wandering spirit, this wandering guide, this wandering Viking, like someone who is alone on his own trail, his own destiny. He's trying to find himself, he's trying to find his home, he's trying to find something. It's a beautiful tale, reminds me, like Jordan mentioned, of Belagar from Total War Warhammer, so I think it works really well. My only complaint I would say about this model, I really like it, my only complaint that I would say is I wish they included a small nod to the fact that he lost everything, and that's kind of like his driving purpose for vengeance. So an example of what I would maybe have liked to see is, you know, maybe instead of his other arm just kind of being like out there on the side, maybe he had like a little book tied to his waist, or like a little scroll, and like on that, or like a chip, like a microchip, and like on that there's some data, like the names of all the people he lost, like inside of his league, or like some kind of binary code that was for his AI, his Votann core that was overcome and overrun with Tyranids, like something that just keeps him going. I think I would have really liked that, and I think it would have elevated the model from what I think is like an 8 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10. Just that little nod. But otherwise, it's a great piece. All right, so the last character that we received was kind of like the equivalent, I guess, of a Dwarven Mad Scientist. I know a lot of people seem to be excited about this guy. I'm going to be completely honest, I don't like him at all visually. I think he clashes too much with the rest of the range. I also think he feels a little bit redundant, which is going to be a topic I come back to in a little bit. I feel like it just doesn't make sense. Like, don't we already have an engineer, the Iron Master, who his whole thing is he builds inventions, he builds weapons, he repairs vehicles, he heals infantry? Like, isn't that our scientist? I don't know why we have an actual scientist. He feels a little bit more like a Necromunda character. I have a theory he was made for Necromunda, and they scrapped it and said, like, okay, just give this one to the Leagues of Votann because we don't need it in Necromunda and we don't want to waste the sculpt. I don't like it personally. Thematically, I don't think it really fits. It feels redundant. I don't really like his face. Maybe, again, it was just a paint scheme thing. I wasn't behind the anime eyes. I don't really like it that much. I will say the helmet looks pretty good. But overall, I just don't find it synergizes very well with the aesthetic of the established army. And again, it just feels a little bit wild and a little bit random. So again, I understand why people aren't on board with this guy either. All right, the last model I'm going to talk about here, the Kapricus Defender, or as I coined on the live stream and people seem to be picking up on, the Kapricus Sun. Now, the Kapricus Sun has two variants. It's got like a shooting platform, and it has a transport variant as well to bring the Jaegers around. Now, when you look at this model, I think like isolated, forget everything you've seen with Leagues of Votann Wave 1. If somebody said, here is the Dwarven model that's coming out in Wave 1, like instead of a Sagittar, we're giving you a Kapricus Sun, a Kapricus Defender, I'm on board. I love it. I think it's absolutely great. It feels like something I would have dreamt of if I was trying to imagine what a Dwarven vehicle might have looked like in a fantasy setting from a frontiersman's perspective. So I think it's really good. It's really cool. I love it a lot. It has that bulk to it in the front, on the sides. It's harmonious, I think, in terms of visualization with some of the rest of the army and the other pieces that we have. It looks like it's kind of customizable because the back is open, so you could maybe put some spare models standing in the back, magnetized if you want as well, just to kind of make it a little bit more congruent. Now, I will say on the back side, I feel like it's a little bit light. Personally, I think it would have made a little bit more sense if it had some kind of like a metallic frame. Like the weight distribution feels a little bit off on the model. I think it's too busy in the front and it's a little bit too vacant in the back. So maybe if there was just like a skeletal metal frame like you see in the front of it, or like on the Sagittar that's put in the back end, I think that would have helped balance it out a little bit, but I'm sure people are going to 3D print stuff for it anyway. Now, on that note, the topic of if I got this in Wave 1, I'd be pretty happy. I think that this is kind of resonating for me for a lot of these models. And I think that underlines, for me anyway, the biggest issue is that a lot of these models feel like I've seen them already. Because I basically have. Like, you take the Kapricus Defender, and it is literally a deconstructed Sagittar kit bashed with the bikes. That is what it is. But again, like, it's not a bad model. It's actually really beautiful. I like it. It's quite cute. But the problem is that I have that already. I've seen it. If that had come out first, alongside the bikes maybe, and then in Wave 2, they're like, all right, here's this new thing. It's a Sagittar. You haven't really seen this before. It's a Kapricus Sun, but it's more defensive. That's cool. I'm on board with that. It looks great. They've innovated. They've added stuff. This kind of feels like a step back in terms of innovation. It feels like they're like, okay, like we got these two things already. Just like, you know, put them together. What do we get? That's like a new Votann infantry, a new Votann vehicle, I should say. And I think for me, again, that's the biggest issue. A lot of these new models feel a little bit uninspired. And I think the Steeljacks embody this quite well. You have this unit that just visually doesn't fit with the whole theme of Leagues of Votann or dwarves in general. And then his weapons feel very redundant. Like the shoulder is literally the shoulder on the Thunderkin. He's holding a big gun like the Thunderkin. He has the Power Fist like the Hearthguard have, the plasma swords like the Hearthguard have, or even a warrior in this case. And it just kind of feels like I've seen this already. Like, you could have probably taken the model we had and just changed their rules a little bit to fit that role, is how I feel. So again, like, the Kapricus Defender, not a bad model by any means. I really like it a lot. And some people really like the Steeljacks. Personally, I don't. But I think the reason a lot of people feel like it's a little bit off is because we've seen these already. We have them. We have most of these pieces. And I think maybe people were expecting something that pushed that boundary, that pushed that innovation a little bit more. Like, instead of Steeljacks, who had the concussion hammers, or like they look like Thunderkin, they literally look like tall Thunderkin, maybe we could have had like some thicker, chunkier mini dreads, right? Like some kind of elite unit like that was actually an enforcer defender, someone that stands on an objective with a shield. If they wanted to make it a robot, right? Or maybe for like the Kapricus Defender, I mean, it's a beautiful model, it's really nice, but I just think like I've seen it already because we have it. Again, I love it, but I've seen it already because we kind of have it. So that's kind of where I landed, and what I think was the biggest reason I felt a little bit off. It wasn't that the reveals were bad. In fact, that's not what I'm trying to say at all. I'm extremely excited by basically all of these reveals, except for the scientist. I'm going to be buying everything, and I think it's beautiful. I'm happy that we have new things to play with, but I think if like GW ever watches this and they're like, I wonder what Votann players want for like a wave 3, I would like them to innovate a little bit more, but stay a bit more true to the spirit of Votann, to the spirit of that wave 1 that they established, that kind of got so many people into the army to begin with. So that's kind of my take on everything from the reveals. I am absolutely thrilled and excited to get all of this painted and on the table as soon as it becomes available. I'm definitely picking up 3 of the artillery pieces right out the gate. But I do just wish, like, maybe the Steeljack specifically and like the Capri Sun did a little bit more to stand out as their own unique pieces inside of our army. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. I will just say on Monday at 4 p.m. EST is probably the time. We are going to be doing a live stream to cover the WTC Votann lists like we did last year as well. It's a little bit earlier than I usually stream, but we have some special guests coming out and we had to accommodate the different time zones. So it should be a really fun stream if you want to tune in and learn a little bit more about the competitive lists, the best lists in the world that are going to be played at the #1 tournament in the world as well. So tune in for that on Monday, and I hope you enjoyed this video as well. Let me know what you think about the new models that are coming out. Do you feel the same way? Are you excited? Am I completely wrong in my take that they are holistically part of the Votann identity? Maybe I missed the mark on it. I don't know. That's just how I feel personally. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.